to everyone watching, and thank you for joining our interview series here at Formula Careers. We're aiming to provide helpful information for you to access the career path you want in motorsport. Today's guest is Gary Rosewell. Gary is an experienced integrated marketing professional in sports. Hi Gary, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Very good. Nice to talk to you, Izzy. Good to be here and look forward to chatting with you about motorsport.
So we're going to start with what you do at the moment. So what's your job title or what do you do, and what are your responsibilities in that role?
Great, brilliant, thank you. So as you said, I'm an integrated marketing professional with around 10 years experience, and that's working across a diverse array of brands, agencies and rights holders. Now I operate as more of an independent setup, and I've been doing that for about 3 years, again, working across those types of entities. It's a really diverse sort of area with which to work in. Motorsport is littered with fantastic professionals. And a good way of explaining my role really as an independent is twofold. One, I will carry out for an agreed amount of time a freelance contract role. And a good example of that would be working with the brilliant Crunch Communications for over a year until the beginning of last year before the pandemic creeped in, unfortunately. And that was a really diverse role, working as an account director. And we'll come on to talking about that in a moment, because agencies, I think, are a brilliant direction for lots of students and grads to go in and gain lots of grassroots experience. And the other side of the business I work on is more of a marketing communications consultancy. And a good example of that would be working with the brilliant motorsportengineer.net. They're an online e-learning platform, effectively. And they provide brilliant courses for motorsport professionals who have lived and breathed motorsport over the years to existing students and grads and even people who just want to brush up on some skills and learn a new industry, really. So I supported Gerard, who manages Motorsport Engineer, from summer last year. We've done some brilliant work together, from committing an audit of his entire business and working out a social media campaign. Lots of editorials. I'm doing a few still at the moment with some colleagues that I used to work with, producing credentials decks, really helping them to present themselves in a really professional way, growing their brand and ultimately growing social media followers and the number of courses that they're selling. So I still do ad hoc work for them at the moment. I'd probably say 50% of my time is dedicated to working with clients and other professional opportunities, but also working on new independent projects that I'm currently working on. So I've got quite an entrepreneurial spirit. I do enjoy creating and working with new concepts and new ideas. And the other 50% of my time is really selling myself at the moment. And again, that's something we'll come on to talking about later. But yeah, it's part of the independent lifestyle. I've chosen it because it gives me more freedom and flexibility and the ability to really steer the ship. It is challenging in normal times, let alone during a pandemic. So yeah, it can be quite challenging, but I do embrace that. I enjoy that. So very diverse, and yes, some brilliant experiences that I've had over the years, for sure.
So I appreciate this question is quite difficult to answer for people in motorsport or in sports in general, but what does a working week look like for you?
Yeah, I've seen some of your previous interviews, and I think everyone in motorsport would struggle to say one week is the same as the other. But if we take one of my previous contract roles as an account director as a good example of that. So account directing really revolves around the subject of integrated marketing. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're working with the diverse array of marketing disciplines, which could be, for example, public relations, advertising, communication, social media, reporting and analysis. That's a huge one, very data-driven projects. Events and guest hospitality, of course, as well, under more normal circumstances. That's a huge part of the marketing side of the business in global sports, let alone motorsport. So there's a lot of different disciplines that will be involved with an account director position. When I talk with Gerald at Motorsport Engineer, the way I allude to marketing in motorsport is really as a people engineer, a social engineer, if you like. So anyone who studies philosophy or anthropology will probably relate to the subject of marketing, because marketing is all about people, and you're really sort of working out why and for what reasons people make the decisions that they do and exploiting that for commercial purposes. That sounds very evil, and I don't want to portray it in that kind of way, but that's what it is. You're understanding people ultimately to help brands grow their awareness and levels of brand affinity, and ultimately to drive sales as well. That's a huge rationale for brands being involved in motorsport. So all of those different disciplines ultimately to help brands grow using sports and generate sales. That's what we do effectively as sports marketing professionals.
So what's the best bit about your job?
I'd say the range of people you work with under normal circumstances. It really is cool just working particularly with the technical side of the business in motorsport. There's so many experienced, very, very knowledgeable people there, sometimes with very niche knowledge as well. There may be specific areas that they're working on to do with the cars that will give that extra performance gain that teams really need. And you might be working with them to uncover their stories and what they do. A big part of what we do actually in marketing is really telling the stories behind the scenes. We are storytellers effectively, and whatever it is, whether it's public relations, advertising, or social media, we are uncovering stories in the sport and conveying them to mass audiences, fans. So certainly working with the diverse array of people that are involved in sport is a big aspect of it. And of course, exposure to the events under more normal circumstances. We'd be traveling to races, working with the drivers, so exposure to some pretty cool projects that are very special when you're involved in them. And I'm not one to be starstruck that often, but working with some of the senior, some of the more experienced drivers, a couple of years ago was certainly pretty cool. So I do enjoy that side of it as well.
Who's the person you are most starstruck by?
Probably Lewis Hamilton. I've only done a couple of events with the guy, but I turned into a little kid again, I think. Hi, how are you? Yes, I just completely forgot about the event for a couple of seconds and just wanted to shake the guy's hand. But he's probably the best example of that, I think.
I think we'd all be starstruck by Lewis Hamilton, so I don't blame you. So now we're going to go back to the start. So what did you study at school, kind of in terms of A levels, and then sort of college or university?
Yeah, so A levels for me was economics, French, and English. It's a little bit different. I think out of those three, I enjoyed French the most, actually, and not just because of the fact that it sort of opens up a lot of other opportunities and it's great to converse with another group of people and learn about the culture and all the rest of it, but it really does draw back the curtain on another country, and I love that side of it, the intercultural experiences that you can get off the back of that. So French was the most enjoyable, and it certainly helps in global sport as well, because if you can speak another language or two, even better, that's going to help you in your communications with a lot of different people, so that will help no ends. Going to university, I studied international business and French, carried that on, and that included an Erasmus year in France in a beautiful city called Angers. If you ever get a chance to visit it, please do. It's about an hour and a half south of Paris. And met some fantastic people on that course. It really helped me to become more confident as a person, I think, being able to speak another language and studying abroad for that year. A lot of people watching may have already participated in the Erasmus year or were going to. That's changing now. I understand there's a Turing program that the government's called it that's going to be coming in. And I'd encourage anybody to really get involved with those experiences because they are really character building. I'm very proud to say I'm best friends with a lot of people that I've met on that course, both British and foreign over the years. But the course itself, just very briefly, it really broke down a broad spectrum of business subjects, right? So that could have been intercultural management, basic learnings of human resources, technical applications, finance, very, very broad spectrum that we covered, emerging markets as well. A very diverse array of courses that we studied with international business, but it was with French that sort of wrapped that as well. So quite internationally focused. After that course, actually, I gained some experience and then went back to university to do a master's. A lot of people ask me, is that always necessary? Did you feel you had to do a master's? At the time, interestingly, it was just over 10 years ago now, and it was during the financial crisis. I'd just done my first internship for ING when they were title partner of Renault F1 team, which was a brilliant experience. And after that year, I felt that I was just so interested in the subject matter of international relations that I wanted to do a master's in it. And I felt that also doing that would really help me to do something that I'm interested in and very passionate about. I think passion's a key word, while skewing the course still towards sports. I did my thesis on sports. And I think that's really important for people thinking about doing either an undergrad course or master's. If you can skew it towards something you're very interested in and might have career aspirations about, then I certainly think that's a logical and very practical way of going about things. So yeah, international relations as a master's, international business and French as an undergrad course.
That's exactly what I'm doing at the moment with my dissertation, is making it sport focused, well, motorsport focused.
Well,
so
yeah,
and I'm enjoying it, so it's definitely a good tip.
Yeah. Best advice I ever had from my tutor was, because I was thinking about what subject to do, he literally said, look, what are you passionate about? Literally go away, have a think about it, write it down, and think how you can apply that to the mechanics of your course. And it's just a win-win, right? You're interested in it, very passionate about it, and it's relevant. So it completely makes sense. Interestingly, when I had my interview for ING, I think my interviewer might have been falling asleep, save for my dissertation that I actually pulled out as a bit of a trump card, and it was directly relevant to the role that I was going for, and it just helped in that conversation to get a foot in the door effectively. So, yeah, really helpful, and I'm glad you're doing that. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did your year in France. Did you do any other extracurriculars or work experience whilst you were at university or whilst you were studying?
Yeah, I had some grassroots roles actually, just to help with the pennies at the time. I wasn't too flush at the time. So a couple of grassroots roles working in, I think I had call centers, local hotels. Might not have enjoyed it at the time, and it might not have been very good money, but it was very character building, met some great people, and it really teaches you the value of money, I think. And that's so important as a young person to have that from a young age, and use that as a springboard on a platform, right? If you are young and you're struggling with opportunities at the moment, don't shy away from those things you might be a little bit embarrassed about. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's all good experience. And in the long run, employers will look very, very favorably at someone who's gained experience, right? There's no substitute for experience.
Absolutely. And this is my favorite question. When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I really know that, and I wanted to be an astronaut. That was always my ambition. It probably still is, actually. I think we're getting closer to that possibility now, I think, with Elon Musk and the likes of Blue Origin from Amazon allowing us to be able to do that in maybe 10, 20 years' time. So yeah, I always wanted to be an astronaut. I'm trying to think how I can relate to that now. I do a lot of scuba diving. I'm a qualified scuba diver, and that's probably the closest I can get to that. However, working in F1, you are exposed to the technical side of the business, and it's very cool working in a social context on the marketing side with a very it's extremely technical and innovative, right? Working in motorsport, so combining the two is just brilliant, and being able to uncover different stories and people in that zone is a real privilege. So yeah, it's not exactly going through space, but it's sort of related, and maybe in 10 years we'll get there.
Yeah. So we're going to do some of the middle now. So we know what you do now and what you did at university. Can you fill in a bit of your career path for us, how you went from job to job?
Yeah, cool. So after my initial undergraduate course, I did get some grassroots roles in marketing just to really get my foot in the door and build those initial skills. And that was very much marketing services orientated. I think I was generating business leads for different technical businesses. Sales and lead generation, I think, is a good core skill to have as a marketeer, because the need for sales is ever present. So that was useful. I did that for about a year. And then I just said to myself, look, I have to do something that I'm interested in, right? And because of that, I really looked to motorsport and F1 in particular. And it must have taken 200 applications, a hell of a lot of networking, and various different emails to agencies, brands, and rights holders to find the right opportunity. And I was very fortunate that ING Bank, at the time a Dutch bank sponsoring Renault, was looking for an intern to come in and work on the internal communications and employee engagement side of the business. So really uncovering stories of Formula One to convey to employees. They had a global workforce of over 100,000 people at the time, as a means of making them aware of the partnership and having them contribute more efficiently to the business effectively. So I did that for a year as an intern, and I worked across different areas of the sponsorship, guest events and hospitality. I was exposed to some of that, advertising, public relations, mainly employee engagement though. After that, because of the financial crisis, I went back to uni and did a master's. But then using the contacts that I found with ING F1, I was able to qualify for an interview at Renault F1 team after that. So that was my first experience of F1, and really exciting. I'd gained, again, some grassroots experience of marketing in sport after the Masters, but this was the sort of career starting moment for me, I felt, after those internships and previous experiences. So if anything, if I can convey one thing in the call today, it's really just maintain those contacts and network, because if you have good relations, then you never know where that's going to take you, right? And Renault at the time, one of my former colleagues, he needed assistance on the sales side of the business, generating sales leads and partnerships. We refer to it now, sponsorship. That term sort of doesn't really exist anymore. But I started out there, went through an interview process, and got the job, which I was super excited about. And yeah, the rest was history after that. I really did enjoy that position, particularly the first few months, right? I've never worked at a Formula One team before. I was walking into the race base, literally, oh my God, it's Formula One wheels, it's incredible. Probably still do that now, to be honest. But it was a really good experience, to the point where I think after 18 months, I left the sales side of the business and progressed the team to an account manager, which basically means that I look after a lot of the sponsors there on a day-to-day basis. So that can be quite a very different role. It's very service orientated, quite reactive to some extent. And to illustrate that, if one of your official partners is planning to go to a particular Grand Prix, they may come to you as the dedicated point of contact to order those tickets, completely manage the entire logistics of that operation in terms of guest management, flights, visas, accommodation, catering, all of the different little nuts and bolts that you can imagine a guest might go through when they attend a race. But beyond that, simply helping them to grow their brand awareness and sales objectives as well. So any daily requests would generally go into a partner manager, and that's what I was doing with Renault. After that, I went to an agency. Always describe that there's a sort of a holy trinity relationship in F1, or sport in general for that matter, where you have rights holders, which are teams effectively, those controlling the rights. You have brands, those that might be investing in rights holders with a sponsorship. And then sort of in between those, you have specialist agencies, which are a dedicated group of marketing professionals who really connect the two. So a good example of that would be something like Petronas or ING or Allianz, a partnership that is so large in scope that they turn to agencies to really support them in their endeavors. So Prism Sports and Entertainment was my first experience of that. They're another fantastic agency. I'd recommend any students to reach out to them if you can at all, because you may be able to get some experience. And what agencies do, I think, better than the other two of that relationship is have such a diverse array of experience with very young people. So, the spirit is pretty good. It's very positive. It's good fun. It's very social. And yeah, I really did enjoy the agency side of the business, and particularly working on a program called the Infinity Engineering Academy, where we were effectively finding the next best engineers to work in Formula One and automotive engineering. So really rewarding role. It was very tiring, very draining, as a lot of my colleagues will attest to, I'm sure, but a very different experience, and one that I look back at very fondly again. And then just finally, to wrap up, I know we're conscious of time. My final experience over the last 3 years has really been as an independent, and that's brought all of the previous experiences together. As I mentioned before, I've chosen that sort of lifestyle because it gives me a little bit more freedom and flexibility as a freelancer. And there I've worked mainly for agencies, particularly Crunch that I alluded to already. Threshold Sports is another great agency that I've worked for, in different sports actually. They work in mass participation running and hiking, so very different experience again. But yeah, overall, it's been a brilliant experience, and right now I'm supporting Motorsport Engineer with their marketing communications endeavors as well. So that, by and large, is the journey so far. As I said, 50% of my time at the moment is dedicated to really selling myself to other businesses. So I'm having a lot of conversations with rights holders and brands and agencies as well. And it's going to be a very interesting second half of the year, I think. Quite exciting, of course, with F1 about to start testing. I think it's next month, isn't it now? And then we'll get the season underway as well. So yeah, really exciting times ahead.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about networking there. Once you've made that initial contact with someone, what's the best way of maintaining that contact? Especially at the moment when you can't be like, let's go for a coffee because of COVID.
Yeah.
Is there any specific thing that I think something that young people find difficult is getting their head around networking. Yeah. So what have you got any specific tips for networking in particular?
Yeah, so firstly, I'd say with that initial contact, if you're reaching out on LinkedIn, for example, I wouldn't do just a cold network search. I would add a little note, if you can, just a very brief note, just qualifying the reasons for why you're getting in touch. Whether it's, hi, I'm Joe Bloggs, I'm just wanting to broaden my network because I'm looking to progress in the industry or something of that sort. I think most people will appreciate the effort to give a rationale for you getting in touch. For someone who's very, very busy, senior management or whatever, they just don't have time to look at every request, number one, and they don't have time to really think about the people who are requesting. So a little note, I think, really, really helps. And then I think if you can really simmer down your experience and what you would like to do for the future, whether that be in a cover note or maybe, as I've done, for example, you've just designed a website that conveys your experience. If you can demonstrate your experience quite creatively and in not such a long-winded manner, I think that will help management to really understand what you're looking for, the questions you're asking, and the direction you want to go. And maybe it's just a case of every other month, just getting in touch with this particular person and just directing them to your website again, something of that sort, just to demonstrate the current experience you're doing. I think you're doing a fantastic example of that as a really good example. You've got some great experience now interviewing people in the industry, and all of that is documented online, right? So you're generating awareness of yourself in a very productive and logical way. And I think managers will look at that quite favorably. So I wouldn't just get in touch with people just for the sake of it. I'd really think about the reasons you're getting in touch with them and make it easy for them to understand what you're looking for and what you're trying to achieve. It's all about making their lives easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I call my difficult, serious journalist question. What has been your biggest challenge and how did you overcome that challenge?
So a couple, I would have said. Firstly, motorsport is no exception. Global sports has the issue as well. Politics can be a huge subject to deal with among different people. There's a lot of players, a lot of chefs in the sport, so to speak, sometimes too many. And I think having a diplomatic head on your shoulders really helps to keep all of the plates spinning on a project. It helps you to put out fires or choose fires to put out when you need to, if there's a particular issue. So I think over the last 10 years, I've generated a lot of experience that's allowed me to be more diplomatic. So even at an organization where there may be personnel there who don't particularly agree on a certain point, being able to have the nous to talk to one, talk to the other, and then talk to everybody as a group, I think that's really, really a very useful skill. It's something I've improved at over the years. The other would be managing large projects on your own with a very small budget, and just having to be extremely innovative, I think, with doing something on a shoestring. That's a challenge that everyone can relate to. We've probably all encountered that at some stage. But when you have senior management bearing down on you with very clear objectives for achieving a project that's, you probably aren't that well financed for, that could be a real challenge. So yeah, having the wherewithal to take a step back, talk to your experienced colleagues, and just really take a breath and think, look, this is going to be okay. I'd say 5 years ago, I was a little bit like that when I was less experienced. And just, if anything, really just drawing up your ideas and your project plan logically, how you're going to approach things. Do one thing at a time. That's the best advice I ever had. I think you have a habit of trying to rush around and do everything, but just doing one thing at a time is a very simple thing to do, and it certainly helps. And delegating as well. I always have a habit of trying to bring everything under my control, a bit of a control freak probably. So being better at delegating has certainly been something I've tried to work on over the years. It's fantastic professionals you work with, so use them. It's not just about you, it's a team effort, right?
Yeah, I'm terrible at not doing about 5-minute things at once. I'm always, my to-do list and what I'm doing is full.
Easily done.
Yeah. So conversely, from the challenges, what's been your proudest moment?
The academy, I think, was 6 years ago now, 7 years ago, long time. That was a really cool project to work on, because I think motorsport and F1 in particular can be very take. People don't have a lot of time. Everything's focused on performance, both on the technical side and the commercial. So to be able to give back is quite a nice thing to be able to do. So if you can steer a marketing project on giving back and supporting people in their endeavors, whether that be students or charitable causes or whoever, then that's really rewarding to be able to do that. So working with motorsport engineers has been great. We're working with young people trying to generate a career in motorsport. But I've also worked with the Infinity Engineering Academy, F1 in schools, and a couple of other projects as well that have been really interesting over the years. So yeah, I love projects that enable you to give back, and they would probably be some of the proudest moments, I think.
If you had to pick one thing, what's the best thing that you've done that got you where you are today?
That is a really good question. The networking side of things, I've got a selection of words here that I think students might appreciate. And the first is passion, second is patience, third is perseverance, and the fourth is presentation, right? I think all of those have some relevance very early on in my career, still now, but particularly early on when you're just trying to get a foot in the door and you're so desperate for work opportunities to come off. You've got to be passionate about what you do. Really don't lose that. Patience as well. I think we have a habit sometimes of just expecting everything, but maintaining patience, maintaining a cool head under pressure can really help you to achieve those objectives. Perseverance, stick to it, just being very driven and dedicated. Again, at the best of times, it's difficult. Right now, during the pandemic, it's even harder to find these opportunities, but it will work out. So take a step back, focus on other hobbies that you might have, whether it's going to the gym or whatever. Gym I find fantastic, actually, just for getting a healthy body and healthy mind. And also presentation. The art of selling oneself cannot really be underestimated. I think that's something to forget sometimes even when on calls like this. I was doing a bit of setup and trying to get the light right, which I obviously didn't, and just little things. So passion, patience, perseverance, and presentation. They're the four lessons that I really tried to teach myself early on that I still try to maintain now, and I think they're really useful.
I think brand you is a really cheesy phrase, but it kind of does apply. Yeah, even though it's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, absolutely. And even for you, when you end up working for an F1 team in the future, you're going to find out that it really does reflect on you, because you could be representing a partner, you could be at an event and you're a spokesperson for a team or something of that sort. So yeah, just thinking about those things and being very professional in all of your interactions, whether you be working at the grocery store or working in a more high profile opportunity, just saying hello to people, whether they're a bus driver or whatever, those sorts of things, and will help you to stay grounded, but also help you to maintain those experiences and skills going into the future.
So when I've been doing these interviews, especially maybe more on the engineering side, whoever I'm interviewing often mentions soft skills as something that's really, really important, but something that young people often overlook. So we did talk a little bit about networking, but what are your tips for people being able to develop those soft skills?
Yeah, that's a really strong point, because we live in a very digital world, right? And the pandemic has accelerated that. We're doing calls over Zoom or Skype or whatever it may be. So what I would advise is for people really to not lose the skills of talking to someone in person. So whether that's family or friends or someone in your bubble at the moment where it's safe to do so. But after this is passed, just generating as much experience talking to people and ensuring that you really retain those skills, particularly the confidence to answer questions on the fly. We're not always going to have time to prepare for things. So yeah, having this sort of presence of mind to maybe practice talking with people prior to an interview or whatever it may be, building your personal speaking qualifications and experience, I think can really, really be useful. Just thinking on the fly about a couple of other things. Dealing with conflict is a huge one. When we were selecting engineers 6 years ago on the academy, it's not just relevant for engineers, but at the time it was quite relevant. Dealing with conflict situations in group work was a really interesting exercise to see who emerged as a leader and who would maybe sit back and not want to give their opinions. It's pure group dynamics, right? It's sociology at its best. So I think dealing with conflict and not being afraid to speak your mind and put your opinions forward is another really good thing. So yeah, a couple of things there. I think speaking to people in person, group dynamics, and having the confidence to present yourself in a very clear and intricate way would really, really help in terms of those soft skills.
So this is a really, really broad question, and you can take it any way in which you want. But what advice would you give to young people that want to work in motorsport?
Yeah, so I think we've covered a few of them, but networking, absolutely. Whether that be on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, generate a conversation with somebody you respect in motorsport. In the early days, I reached out to a lot of agencies, actually, just really getting myself out there as much as possible and asking questions and wanting to learn. I think that's something that we can all do well to remember, that we really want to learn from professionals and more experienced people. Stay humble, be grateful for the opportunity to speak to people who are giving you their time. So yeah, networking as much as possible, being proactive. Opportunities are not going to come to you, so you're going to have to fight for these, right? In some of the contract positions I'm going for at the moment, there may be 300 people applying for those. So you really have to hone those skills and just be extremely resilient. That's another one. These opportunities are not going to come off all the time. So, again, take a step back, take a breath of fresh air. You have other hobbies, other focuses, other people to talk to and open up about frustrations, perhaps. That's a big one for young people at the moment in these crazy times we're living in. So yeah, networking, make things easier for the people you're reaching out to potentially. And yeah, help yourself by having other interests and passions besides motorsport or the objective you're aiming for. I think that's a really important one, and I've been guilty of that in the past, of just being so focused on the prize. My God, I couldn't have been any more dedicated to it that I lost sight of other stuff on a personal level, whether that be relationships or hobbies or health and fitness. So there's some good learnings for me, and I'm happy to pass those on to people who might be in the same situation at the moment.
I think hopefully, what with us all dealing with a pandemic, we're all more resilient now than we were a year ago. So hopefully that'll help us all. In terms of the pandemic, obviously a lot of people are worried about opportunities disappearing or not being there, companies having to get smaller. What would you say to those students that are worried about them about to graduate and just there not being those opportunities there for them after studying? Yeah.
So it's normal. Things like this have maybe not happened on this scale, albeit 100 odd years ago. But we do go through cycles of financial crises and other incidents happening around the world. So you're not alone. A lot of us have been through issues like this before. I would encourage you to talk about any frustrations as much as possible, either with friends or family or whoever. That's a really, really important one. And again, take a bit of a step back, because opportunities aren't always going to come around. Be patient, be humble, focus your course if you can towards your end objectives. There's a brilliant girl, I can't remember her name, but she reached out just the other day on that exact point, and she was considering whether to do a master's or not. And why not do it if you're absolutely passionate about it? But if you do it, maybe try and skew it towards your professional objectives. And if you can, gain some professional experience at the same time. Again, alluding to a point we mentioned earlier, whatever that experience may be, it's nothing to be ashamed about or embarrassed about. It's all good experience, talking to people, being professional, offering a service, and it's something that ultimately employers will look quite favorably upon. So I think, to summarize, I think being very proactive, being emotionally intelligent, and just being as resilient as possible until this hopefully blows over and we can get through to more normal circumstances. And like you said, I think we've learned a lot during this process, right? So let's turn a negative situation into a positive and say, actually, in hindsight, that made me tougher, this whole process. And it was, I don't want to say it was worth it going through this. None of us want to be. But there are some positives that come out of it. There's creativity from the madness. And I think there's a lot of ideas and innovation that can come out of difficult times at the moment. So yeah, really think about it, and times will come good eventually.
That's great advice. So finally, have you got anything else that you'd like to add?
No, just other than, I absolutely sympathise with a lot of people in the audience who are going through tough times at the moment. It is tough in normal circumstances, right? Let alone during a global pandemic.
Yeah.
But I've done a few public speaking events with Motorsport Engineer, and there are similar questions coming up. But yeah, a couple of key points there, and particularly sort of talking to people, any frustrations you may have, but definitely be proactive. There still are opportunities out there. For people who are more marketing orientated, I'd probably advise agencies, because I think there's more opportunities. It's a younger, sometimes more social group of people to work with, so it can be fantastic grassroots experience. And have fun with what you're doing, be passionate about it, and that's pretty much it. But any questions, if anybody does have any, I'd be happy to answer those. If you do reach out on LinkedIn or other means, happy to get in touch with you.
Great, lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for watching. If you do have any suggestions or requests for people for us to interview, please let me know at Izzy Holman, that's IZZIEHOLMAN, on all social media and on LinkedIn too. Until next time.